and you'd have like a little stack of books, and you'd go to the little blue chip stamp store, and they had things that you could buy with the trading stamps that you got from buying groceries and what have you. And that was where my first guitar came from. It was a little blue Fender knockoff. But, hey, it sounded good to me, and I used that for a couple of years. I even played it in my first band, and then after a while, I got to where, I actually got Fender guitars, and that's where I am now. I'm sort of a Fender Strat guy as far as electrics go. But that's kind of where it started. I had a really smart teacher back in 7th grade. All right, we're talking, 13 years old. She was my English teacher, Mrs. Seal. This was in Thousand Oaks, California. And she, I was doing okay in her class, but she heard me playing guitar one day. And she said, Earl, you're writing your own songs? She said, you could do that for extra credit. If you write a song and play it in front of the class, I'll give you extra credit. So I started doing that, and that was where I got comfortable in playing in front of people. I would, and before this happened, I kind of got teased a lot at school and stuff, and it kind of stopped that too. It saved my life in a lot of different ways. So I would write a song, sort of like you would write, if you're in Tin Pan Alley or something. It was an assignment. And, I do topical songs. I do love songs. I was 13 years old, so they're mostly frustrated love songs, But that was kind of how I got my start in expressing myself with music. And I found out, the class would clap for me when I finished a song. And I wound up getting an A+ in English, and everybody kind of won in that scenario. So that's kind of where it started for me, and I now it's just like it's just so natural. I mean, the guitar is just another appendage. Oh
yeah,
it's that close.
You can get habit for me. And I haven't played the guitar now because I got arthritis for probably about 5 years. And I guess my wife is happy about it because I'd sit there and be playing, and she goes, please, I can't watch the TV because you're so loud. But using the headphones didn't work, in playing. It just didn't have the same feeling.
Yeah. Well, I usually play acoustic. I practice a lot on acoustic. And, but, I love to play electric, too. It just, I mean, we live in a condominium here in the West Valley of Los Angeles. And so I've got neighbors on top of me and underneath me here and on both sides. So I can't really, jam through the amp really loudly. But acoustic, thankfully, is kind of where I found my initial love for music. If you play electric, you can certainly play solo electric, right? Les Paul did that. A lot of people have done that. But in acoustic, there's just something so organic about it, and I feel very close to my acoustic guitar. It's just Franz Schubert, the composer. He wrote the Unfinished Symphony and the Trout Quintet and all these beautiful classical works. He was a guitar player, and that was his favorite instrument. This is a great composer from the 1800s, and he said that an acoustic guitar is like a little orchestra that you can play with your own two hands, and that's the way I kind of look at it. And I also know that if I can play something really well on acoustic, and electric has much easier action as far as playing on the strings. So if I can play something and knock it out on acoustic, I know I'm going to be able to knock it out on electric. It's just sort of, obvious. So, I play a lot of acoustic guitar, and I kind of always have gravitated to my acoustic.
I think to me, acoustic, it just is more romantic. Not just for people listening, just romantic in general playing. I mean, it just has a different feeling than electric guitar. It's soft, it's sexy, it has meaning to it. Even a bad song sounds good with acoustic guitar.
Well, back in high school, we could, we could make bonfires at the beach, county line out here. And I was one teenage guy amongst a million teenage guys. But if you had the guitar and you're playing the Neil Young song or something, Cowgirl in the Sand, suddenly you had a little group of people. And it would be, a little group of female people sometimes, which wasn't a bad thing. So, I think there's just a lot of positives that came about from playing acoustic guitar, and they're still there for me. It's just kind of an intimate thing. You with an electric, you have to plug in, and you need your effects boxes, and you have to play with the amplifier and stuff, and I love doing that too. I love to shred on an electric. I mean, you can't do that. Well, I can shred on acoustic. I can sometimes I do. I'll put my acoustic through effects boxes, and it pretty much sounds just like an electric. But an electric is just easier to play, and it certainly has its place, and an acoustic guitar has its place, which is in a more intimate setting. You can't really serenade somebody with an electric in the spur of the moment.
No, it doesn't work that way. No.
Yeah. No, you need time to set up, and with an acoustic, you pull it out of the guitar case and you go. Yeah.
There is a blind guy. It's all over YouTube, and it's been on Facebook. And he has a young girl. It's from the Philippines, and he plays the guitar. She sings. This guy can play acoustic guitar. I've never heard anybody. I wish I could think of his name. He could play it just like I listened to it, and I listened to it over and over again. It was like no effort at all for him. And he could do things with an acoustic guitar I haven't seen anybody ever do. It was just so shocking.
Wow. Yeah, there's some great players out there. There's some great players out there. Music, and it's strange. I mean, there is a connection between being a musician and being a ufologist. I've found this. A lot of musicians see UFOs. A lot of musicians seem to have alien contact as well. John Lennon, he saw a UFO in New York City back in 1974. He wrote about it. He said he wrote about it in a song. Days like these. Mama told me there would be days like these. He said there are UFOs over New York, and I forget the other part of the verse. UFOs over New York, and it doesn't surprise me, or something like that. But I mean, John Lennon saw a UFO. One of the guys in my life that played really strongly as a friend was Chris Squire from the band Yes. The progressive rock band. They did Roundabout, Owner of a Lonely Heart, and all those great songs. And I was a big fan of Chris's for years, since I was a teenager. Now, back around 2002 or so, one of my friends in my musician groups started dating Chris Squire. And lo and behold, Chris fell in love with her. Her name's Scotland Taylor back in those days. Now it's Scotty Squire. So I sort of was an inherited friend to Chris. Now, Chris had a close encounter with a UFO. It was back in 1977 when he was touring in the UK behind Yes's album called Going for the One. And apparently he was in a caravan, which is what we would call an RV. Every guy in the band had their own little RV at that point because they didn't get along so well in one bus. And they could afford it at that point, so they all kind of drove to gigs in their own buses. And anyway, Chris had his driver pull over because he had to go use nature's own bathroom. So he got out. It was in the middle of nowhere. And he was doing his thing on a rock, more or less. And he looks up, and he is being hovered over by a UFO. He said it was like 35, 40 feet across. It was maybe 40, 50 feet in the air. He said it was encircled with lights, and it just hung there like nobody's business. And he's standing there peeing on a rock, looking up and seeing this thing. And when he told me this story, I said, well, Chris, come on. I mean, were you taking LSD or something? I mean, you know. And it's like, no. You know, he didn't want to wind up on the business end of Chris's sense of humor. He could denigrate anybody better than anybody that I've ever known. It's like, no, I was driving and we were taking turns and we were just on the way to the gig. I had to play a 3-hour gig. I wasn't doing any drugs. Now, he said, I saw a UFO. And anyway, he watched this thing just hover there for about 2 minutes, and then he said it turned to the side and shot off into the distance. And he watched it just go into a vanishing point. Now, Chris told me about this. You know, he'd like to hang out and drink too much and talk about stuff, and he loved to talk about UFOs. So he told me about his sighting, and I told him a little bit about my mom. You know, I told him that, you know, well, my mom, you know, she worked for Hughes Aircraft. She actually worked for Howard Hughes personally, and she said that UFOs are very real, that our government knows that, and that they're not being honest with the public about it. And this got Chris going, because he just wanted to talk about the phenomenon. And, you know, I never saw him get really excited about stuff except, you know, when you talk about UFOs with Chris. So the conversation got over to Jacques Vallée's idea of, well, maybe, you know, some UFOs are us from the future, that they're tourists, you know, humans, or, you know, scientists coming back to interesting times in human history. And when you see a UFO, it might just be, you know, a human craft that's actually a time traveler. He freaking loved that. He loved the concept. And, you know, I was leaving. I had to go home. I think I had to work the next day. But he grabbed some Post-its from off his refrigerator. And I'm standing in the door, walking out the door. He said, Earl, before you go, tell me again, what did you say, the exact words about, you know, the future and humans? And I had to think for a second. I said, well, aliens are only us from the future. That was Jacques Vallée's us from the future hypothesis. He scribbled it down on this Post-it note, and he gave me this huge bear hug. You know, I didn't think about it for a long time. But the next time I went to see Yes in concert, they played a song called Aliens Are Only Us from the Future. That was Chris's song.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, in talking with Chris and hearing his UFO story, a lot of that really pushed me into becoming a UFO investigator. You know, and I've been interested in UFOs for many years, since I was a kid. And a lot of the time, you know, it was sort of like, well, I don't know if it's real. You know, I don't know if people are making this up. You know, I know what my mom said, but maybe the government was lying to her. I don't know, but I want to find out for myself. And my late night conversations with Chris Squire kind of pushed me in that direction. Now, very, very sadly, about 3 years ago, Chris passed away from leukemia. He got leukemia, and it just took a couple of months. It was just a really bad form of that particular kind of blood cancer. And the last time that I spoke with Chris on the phone, I had just become a field investigator for MUFON, and I was so happy that I got to tell him that. I mean, he passed away maybe 4 days later.
Oh, wow.
But I did get to share that with Chris, and he was really happy about it.
Now, hey, Earl, we need to take a break for the radio station, so if you want to get a cup of tea, coffee, or a refill on your beer, we'll be back in about 3 minutes, okay?
Sounds good, Gary.
Okay, so we'll be right back.
Maggot was a biker and drove his motorcycle very fast. Drove a big chop hop with a gang color jacket and ran down Citizens for laughs. He had an old lady named Petula who packed an automatic 45 gun. They had just come up from California where they'd shot 6